Chapter 55 of the Monster Picture of Whales. I shall ere long paint to you as well as one can without canvases, something like the true form of a whale as he actually appears to the eye of the whaleman when is his own absolute body. The whale is moored alongside the whale ship, so that can be fairly stepped on there.
It may be worthwhile, therefore, previously to advert to those curious imaginary portraits of him, which even down to the present day confidently challenge the faith of the landsman. It is time to set the world right in this matter, by proving such pictures of the whale all wrong. It may be that the primal source of all these pictorial delusions will be found among the oldest Hindu, Egyptian, and Grecian sculptures. Forever since those inventive but unsculptured times, when on the marble paneling of temples and pedestals of statues, and on shields, medallion, cups, and coins, the dolphin was drawn in scale of chain armor like Saladin's and a helmeted head like St. George's. Ever since then has something of the same sort of license prevailed not only in most popular pictures of the whale, but in many scientific presentations of him. Now, by all odds, the most ancient extant portrait of him, anyways, purporting to be the whale's, is to be found in the famous cavern pagoda of Elephanta in India. The Brahmins maintained that in the almost endless sculptures of that immortal pagoda, all the trades and pursuits, every conceivable evocation of men were prefigured ages before any of them actually came into being. No wonder then that in some sort of our noble profession of whaling should have been there shadowed forth. The Hindu whale referred to occurs in a separate department of the wall depicting the incarnation of Vishnu in the form of Leviathan, learnedly known as the Mace Avatar, but through his sculpture is half man and half whale, so as only to give the tail of the latter, yet that small selection of him is all wrong. It looks more like the tapering tail of an anaconda than the broad palms of the true whale's majestic flukes.
But go to the old galleries and look now at the great Christian painter's portrait of this fish, for he succeeded no better than the Anatavilion Hindu. It is Guido's picture of pressure and racing and on from the sea monster, or the whale. Where did Guido get the model of such a strange creature as that? Nor does Hogarth in painting the same thing in his own pressure the setting. Make out one with better the huge plumes of that hydrogen monster undulged on the surface, scarcely drawing on each inch of water. It has a sort of hard bar on its back and a distended, tusked mouth into which the bellows are rolling. Might be taken for the Traitors' Gate leading from the Thames by water into the Tower.
Then there are protomose whales of old Scots Sibbald and Jonah's whale, as depicted in the prints of old Bibles and the cuts of old primers. What shall be said of these? As for the bookbinder's whale, winding like a vine stalk round the stalk of a descending anchor, is stamped and gilded on the backs of title pages of many books with old and new that is a very picturesque but poorly fabulously creature imitated. I take it from the like figure on antique vases. Though universally dominated a dolphin, I nevertheless call this bookbinder's fish an attempt at a whale because it was so intended. When the device was first introduced, it was introduced by an old Italian publisher somewhere about the 15th century during the revival of learning. And in those days, and even down to a comparatively late period, dolphins were popularly supposed to be a species of the Levitian. In the vignettes and other embellishments of some ancient books, you will at times meet the very curious touches of the whale, where all manner of spouts, jets, dew, hot springs and cold, Saratoga and Baden-Baden came bubbling up from his unexhausted brain. In the title page of the original edition of The Advancement of Learning, you will find some curious whales.
Questioning all these unformless attempts, let us glance at those pictures of Leviathan portraiting to be sober scientific discussions by those who know in old Hare's collection of voyages. There are some plants of whales extract from a Dutch book of voyages, A.D. 1671, entitled A Whaling Voyage to Spizisteren in the ship John's in the Whale Peter Prussian of First Master.
In one of those plates, the whales, like great rafts of logs, are represented lying among ice isles with white bears running over their living backs. In another plate, the prodigious blunder is made of representing the whale with perpendicular flukes. Then again, there is an imposing quarto written by the Captain Colnett, a post-captain in the English Navy, entitled A Voyage Round Cape Horn into the South Seas, for the purpose of extending the spermaceti whale fisheries. In this book, it is an outline proposing to be a picture of a pfister of spermaceti whale drawn by scale from one killed on the coast of Mexico, August 1793, and hoisted on deck. I doubt not the captain had this veracious picture taken for the benefit of his marines. To mention but one thing about it, let me say that it has an eye which applied according to the accompanying scale to a full-grown sperm whale would make the eye of that whale a bow window some 5 feet long. Oh, my gallant captain, why did he not give us Jonah looking out of that eye? Nor are the most conscientious compilations of natural history for the benefit of the young and tender, free from the same heinousness of mistake. Look at that popular work, Goldsmith's Animated Nature. In the abridged London edition of 1807, there are plates of an alleged whale and a narwhal. I do not wish to seem intelligent, but this unsightly whale looks much like an amputated sow, and as for the narwhal, one glimpse at it is enough to amaze one that in this 19th century such a hippogriff could be palmed for genuine upon any intelligent public of schoolboys. Then again, in 1825, Bernard German, Count de Lecapede, a great naturalist, published a scientific systemized whale book, wherein are several pictures of the different species of the Levitian. All these are not only incorrect, but the picture of the mysticus or Greenland whale, that is to say the right whale, even scores by a long experienced man as touching that species, declared not to have its counterpart in nature.
The placing of the cap chef to all this blundering business was reversed for the scientific Frederick Cuvier, brother to the famous Baron in 1836. He published a natural history of whales in which he gives what he calls a picture of the sperm whale. Before showing that picture to any naturalistic, you had best provide this for your summary. We start from the net text in a word. Frederick's Cuvier's sperm whale is not a sperm whale, but a squash. Of course, he never had the benefit of a whaling voyage.
Of course, he never had the benefit of a whaling voyage. Such men seldom have. But whence he delivered that picture, who can tell? Perhaps he got it as his scenic predecessor in the same field. Desmarets got one of his authentic aberrations that is from a Chinese drawing. And what sort of lively lad with a pencil those Chinese are. Many queer cups and saucers inform us. As for the sign painters' whales seen in the streets hanging over the shops of oil dealers, what shall be said of them? They are generally Richard III whales with dromedary humps and very savage, breakfasting on 3 or 4 sailor tarts, and that is whaleboats full of mariners. That deformities floundering in seas of blood and blue paint.
But these manifold mistakes in depicting the whale are not so very surprising. After all, consider most of the scientific drawings have been taken from the standard fish, and these are about as correct as a drawing of a wrecked ship with a broken back would correctly represent the noble and male itself in all its undushed pride of hull and spears. Though elephants have stood for their full length, the living Leviathan has never yet fairly quoted himself for his portrait. The living whale, in his full majesty and scientificity, is only to bulk off him is out of sight, like a latched line of battleship, and out of the element it is a thing eternally impossible for mortal man to start him bodily into the air, so as to possess all his mighty swells and unvolutions, and not to speak of the highly probable differentiation of country between a young sucking whale and a full-grown Leviathan. Yet even in the case of one of those young sucking whales hoisted to a ship's deck, such is then the outlandish eel-like limbered yawning shape of him that his own first experience in the delve himself could not catch.
But it may be fancied that from the naked skeleton of the stranded whale, accurate hints may be derived touching his true form. not at all. For it is one of the more curious things about the Levithian that his skeleton gives very little idea of his general shape. Though Jeremy Bentham's skeleton, which hangs for candelabra in the library of one of his executors, correctly conveys the idea of a burly-browed utilitarian old gentleman with all Jeremy's other leading personal characteristics. Yet nothing of this kind could be inferred from any Levithian's articulated bones. In fact, as the great hunter says, the mere skeleton of the whale bears the same relation to the fully invested and padded animal as the insect does to the chrysalis that so roundly envelops it. This particularly is striking evinced as in the head, as in some part of this book will be incidentally shown. It is also very curious displayed in the side fin, the bones of which almost exactly answer to the bones of the human hand, minus only the thumb. This fin has 4 regular bone fingers, the index, middle ring, and little finger. But all these are permanently lodged in their fleshy covering, as the human fingers in an artificial covering. However recklessly the whale may sometimes serve us, said humorous Stubb one day, he can never be truly said to handle us without mittens.
These reasons, then any way you may look at it, you must needs collateral that the great Leviathan is that one creature in the world which must remain obtained to the last true one portrait, may hit the mark much nearer than any other, but none can hit it with any very considerable degree of extraneousness. So there is no earthly way of finding out precisely what the whale really looks like. And the only mode in which you can develop even a tolerable idea of his living contour is by going whaling yourself, but by so doing you run no small risk of being internally stove and sunk by him. Wherefore it seems to me you had best not be too fat-tested in your crystal touching this Leviathan.